All right, so get ready, because today we're going to unlock a superpower. One you didn't know you needed.
Yeah.
Psychological safety at work.
Ooh, a superpower. I like that.
Right. So we're going to be talking about how to create a space where everyone feels comfortable speaking up at work.
Right.
Sharing wild ideas and even admitting, those oops moments.
Yeah.
Without the fear of being judged or banished to the supply closet.
This is a supply closet. That's good.
Right.
Yeah, you might be thinking, oh, that sounds nice, but is it really that important? But really, the research says yes.
Really?
And it's not just about, creating a happy workplace. We're talking about real results.
Okay.
Better innovation, increased performance, fewer accidents, even lives saved in hospitals. This stuff is powerful.
Wow, so it's not just fluffy stuff. This is actually very important.
No, it's not fluffy at all. It's pretty serious.
So you sent over some excerpts from The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson, and we're going to do a deep dive into that. And this book really digs into why psychological safety is so important, especially in today's world. Work is less about routine tasks and more about making judgment calls.
Right.
Navigating uncertainty and constantly collaborating.
Exactly. And that means speaking up with ideas, concerns, or even just questions. It's really mission critical these days.
Okay.
But let's be honest, most of us are wired to hold back.
Oh, yeah.
We've all experienced that voice in our heads. Don't say anything, you'll sound dumb. Or what if they hate your idea?
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
It's like our brains are hardwired for self-preservation.
Ugh, tell me about it. I'm pretty sure I've broken out in a sweat just thinking about asking a question in a meeting.
Yeah.
But Edmondson calls this the staggering cost of silence. And she's not exaggerating. She gives some really powerful real-world examples of how lack of psychological safety can lead to disasters.
She does. It's easy to think, oh, that wouldn't happen at my company. But then you read about these massive companies.
Yeah. Volkswagen, Wells Fargo, Nokia.
Yeah.
And how they stumbled partly because people were afraid to speak up. And then it hits home that this is serious business.
Wow. Okay, so we get it. Staying silent can be risky.
Yeah.
But what does psychological safety actually look like in action?
Yeah, good question.
I mean, is it just about being nice to each other, or is there more to it?
There's definitely more to it. And Edmondson makes a really important distinction right off the bat. She says, psychological safety is not immunity from consequences.
Ooh, okay, so it's not a free pass to slack off or avoid accountability.
Not at all. In a psychologically safe workplace, people are not hindered by interpersonal fear. So it's not about lowering standards or letting things slide. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe to contribute their best, without worrying about being humiliated or blamed for making a mistake.
Okay. So that makes sense.
Okay.
So it's about creating trust so people feel empowered to take risks and share ideas and even admit when they mess up. It's like instead of hiding your mistakes under the rug, you can actually learn from them.
Exactly. That's where the real magic happens. Think about a time you hesitated to speak up at work. Like, what was holding you back? Now imagine feeling completely comfortable voicing your concerns, suggesting a crazy idea. That's the power of psychological safety in action.
Okay. So how do we create that kind of magic in our own workplaces? Because let's be honest, most of us don't work at Pixar or Google X.
True. But the good news is that Edmondson doesn't just tell us why psychological safety matters. She gives us practical tools to actually build it. And these tools can work anywhere, even if your office doesn't come with, a ping pong table or a nap pod.
Okay, I'm so ready for these tools. Give me the secrets. Spill the tea. Let's do this.
All right. Hold your horses. Let's start by breaking down Edmondson's framework into 3 key areas: setting the stage, inviting participation, and responding productively. And don't worry, we'll dive into each one with real-world examples and tips that you can actually use. No fluffy theories here.
Okay, I am officially intrigued. Setting the stage, inviting participation, responding productively. It's like a recipe for success. But before we get all Gordon Ramsay on this,
right,
let's start with the basics. What exactly does setting the stage mean in this context?
Well, it's all about creating the right conditions for psychological safety to flourish. Imagine it like planting a garden. You wouldn't just toss seeds on concrete and expect them to grow, right?
Definitely not. I'm picturing some sad, wilted seedlings.
Exactly. You need to prepare the soil, make sure it's fertile, provide the right amount of sunlight and water. Similarly, setting the stage for psychological safety is about creating an environment where trust and openness can take root and grow.
Okay, so we need to create that fertile ground for psychological safety to thrive. But how do we do that in a workplace, especially when there are deadlines, pressure, and, maybe even a few office politics thrown in for good measure?
Well, that's where Edmondson's framework comes in handy. She gives us concrete actions to take. For example, framing the work as a learning process where mistakes are expected and valued, not punished.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about embracing those oops moments and turning them into learning opportunities.
Precisely. And another key part of setting the stage is emphasizing the importance of candor and diverse perspectives.
Oh,
It's about making it clear that everyone's voice matters, that different viewpoints aren't just welcome, they're essential.
I like that. It's about creating a space where people feel comfortable disagreeing and challenging assumptions and bringing their unique perspectives to the table. But let's be real. That's easier said than done.
It is. And that's why the leader's role is so crucial in setting the stage. They need to walk the talk, model humility and openness, be willing to admit when they don't have all the answers.
So it's not just about talking the talk. It's about being the change you want to see in the workplace.
You got it.
Lead by example and all that jazz.
Exactly. And once you've set the stage, you need to invite participation. But we'll save that juicy bit for later.
Oh, cliffhanger. All right, listeners, stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive into the art of inviting participation and learn how to get everyone's voices heard, even those who usually prefer to, blend into the background.
Yes.
This is going to be good.
It is. All right, so let's jump back into this idea of inviting participation. It sounds simple enough, but you'd be surprised how many workplaces struggle with this.
I can imagine. It's one thing to say, hey, everyone, speak up. It's another to actually create an environment where people feel comfortable doing that.
Exactly. It's like setting up a beautiful buffet with all the most delicious food, but forgetting to tell anyone where the dining room is.
Okay.
They'll be wandering around starving while you're stuck with, a mountain of untouched deliciousness.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid that awkward buffet situation at work? How do we actually get people to the table, so to speak?
Well, one of the most powerful tools in Edmondson's arsenal is asking the right questions. And she's not talking about those yes or no close-ended questions that shut down conversation faster than you can say mandatory team-building exercise.
You mean like, did you finish that report?
Exactly. Instead, she advocates for what she calls powerful, open-ended questions. These are questions that spark curiosity, invite deeper thinking, and encourage people to share their perspectives without feeling like they're being put on the spot.
Okay, so more like, what are some of the challenges you're facing with the report?
Yeah.
Or what ideas do you have for improving the reporting process?
Bingo. It's subtle, but it makes a huge difference. Instead of just extracting information, you're inviting dialogue, creating space for different viewpoints, and showing that you genuinely value people's input.
Yeah, it's like the difference between a police interrogation and a friendly chat over coffee. One makes you want to clam up, the other makes you want to open up and share.
That's a great analogy. And, it's not just about the words you use, it's also about your tone and body language. Like, are you genuinely curious? Are you truly listening? Those nonverbal cues can speak volumes.
So it's about creating a space where people feel safe to share, even if their ideas are half-baked or controversial or completely different from yours.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because when you have that kind of openness, that's when the real innovation happens. That's when people feel empowered to challenge the status quo and come up with those game-changing ideas.
Okay, so powerful questions are a key ingredient in this recipe for participation. What else can leaders do to make that metaphorical buffet irresistible?
Well, another crucial element is creating structures for feedback and idea sharing. This could involve, regular team check-ins, brainstorming sessions, or even online platforms where people can submit ideas anonymously.
Oh, the anonymous suggestion box. I remember those from my school days.
Yeah.
It's amazing how something so simple can make people feel more comfortable speaking up.
It really can. Because sometimes, even in the most supportive environments, people might hesitate to share their thoughts publicly, especially if they're new to the team or worried about stepping on someone's toes.
So it's about giving people options, meeting them where they are, and making sure everyone has a voice, even those who are a little more introverted or hesitant to speak up in a group setting.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of active listening. This means really paying attention to what people are saying, asking clarifying questions, and reflecting back what you've heard to make sure you understand.
It sounds so simple, but it's so easy to get caught up in our own thoughts and agendas and forget to really listen to what others are saying.
Oh, absolutely.
We've all been guilty of that at some point.
We have. But when you truly listen, you're not just gathering information, you're building trust, showing respect, and creating a space where people feel heard and valued. And that's a powerful foundation for psychological safety.
Yeah, it's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right. And speaking of caring, let's move on to the third and final part of Edmondson's framework, responding productively. This is where things get really interesting, and we can explore how leaders can react to feedback, especially the tough kind, in a way that strengthens psychological safety rather than shutting it down.
Okay, I'm ready for this because, let's be honest, getting feedback can be a little like getting a dental checkup.
Yeah.
It's good for you, but it's not always the most pleasant experience.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that we're not the dentist, causing everyone to clench up in fear?
Excellent question. And luckily, Edmondson gives us some great tips on how to respond to feedback in a way that keeps those communication channels open and flowing.
Okay, so we've set the stage, we've sent out the invitations for participation, and now we're at the main event, responding productively.
Yeah.
I'm ready to learn how to handle this part gracefully because, let's face it, feedback can be a mixed bag.
Right.
Sometimes it's a delicious slice of cake, and sometimes it's a big bite of a truth sandwich.
That's a great way to put it. And, how leaders respond to feedback, especially the tough kind, can make or break the whole psychological safety thing.
It makes sense. If you finally work up the courage to speak your mind, and then your idea gets shot down, or worse, ridiculed, you're probably not going to be eager to share again anytime soon.
Exactly. It can be like that game Whack-A-Mole. As soon as someone pops up with an idea or concern, bam, they get whacked down. It doesn't exactly encourage participation.
So how do we avoid being the whack-a-mole manager? How do we respond in a way that actually encourages people to keep those ideas and suggestions coming?
Well, according to Edmondson, one of the most important things is to simply express appreciation. And I mean genuine appreciation, not just a robotic, thanks for sharing.
So even if someone brings up something that you totally disagree with, or that's potentially uncomfortable to hear, you still need to acknowledge their courage and thank them for speaking up.
Absolutely. Remember, the goal is to create a climate of trust and openness. And that means making it clear that all voices are welcome, even the ones that challenge your assumptions or make you a little squeamish.
I'm starting to see the power in that. It's like saying, hey, I might not agree with you on this particular issue, but I respect you for speaking your mind, and I want you to keep those ideas coming.
Exactly. And that kind of response can be incredibly disarming. It takes the sting out of disagreement and allows for a more productive and respectful conversation.
Okay, expressing appreciation is a great first step. What else can leaders do to respond productively? Because, let's be real, sometimes feedback points to a real problem that needs to be addressed.
Right, and that's where it's important to destigmatize failure, especially what Edmondson calls intelligent failures. Those mistakes that come from taking calculated risks and trying new things.
Oh, yes. We talked about Google X and their failure parties. That's a pretty bold approach, but it seems to be working for them.
It does, and it's a great example of how leaders can shift the mindset around failure. Instead of seeing it as something to be ashamed of, they frame it as a valuable learning opportunity.
It's like that Thomas Edison quote, I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
Exactly. And when you create that kind of culture where people feel safe to experiment and even fail, that's when you unlock true innovation.
So how do we bring this intelligent failure concept into the real world where, not every mistake results in a groundbreaking invention?
It starts with how leaders talk about failure. They need to model vulnerability and openness, be willing to share their own mistakes and what they learn from them.
So it's about normalizing failure, taking the shame out of it, and turning those oops moments into aha moments.
Exactly. And when someone does make a mistake, instead of pointing fingers and assigning blame, focus on the learning. Ask questions like, what happened? What can we learn from this? How can we do better next time?
It's like a post-mortem, but without the judgment.
Right. The goal is to extract valuable lessons from the experience, not to punish the person who made the mistake.
Okay, all of this makes so much sense. But what about those situations where someone really does mess up? I mean, they break a rule, act unethically, or do something that's just plain wrong. Do we just let that slide in the name of psychological safety?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of what psychological safety is and isn't. It's not about creating a free-for-all where anything goes. It's not about lowering standards or avoiding accountability.
So there are still consequences for bad behavior.
Absolutely. In fact, holding people accountable for their actions is essential for maintaining trust and psychological safety.
That makes sense. If people feel like there are no consequences for bad behavior, they're less likely to trust the system, and that can actually erode psychological safety.
Exactly. Edmondson calls this sanctioning clear violations. It's about making it clear that certain behaviors are unacceptable and will not be tolerated.
So it's about setting boundaries. Psychological safety exists within a framework of clear expectations and accountability. It's like having a garden with both fertile soil and a fence to keep out the pests.
Perfect analogy. And it's the leader's job to create and maintain both, to nurture that growth and protect that space.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of psychological safety. I'm starting to see how it's so much more than just a feel-good buzzword. It's about creating a workplace, and maybe even a world, where people feel safe to bring their full selves to the table, to take risks, to learn from their mistakes, and ultimately to achieve amazing things.
It is powerful stuff. And the best part is that it's something that any leader can cultivate, regardless of their industry or leadership style.
Well, listeners, we've given you a lot to chew on today. Now it's your turn. What's one small step you can take today to foster psychological safety in your own life, in your team, in your community? Think about it, and then take action. You never know the positive impact you might have. And who knows, maybe you'll even inspire the next Pixar masterpiece or Google moonshot.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and stay fearless.